Welcome to a special edition of Scan FYI. Today is September 11th, and we've got a special guest to commemorate that day on September 11th, 2001. So stay tuned. Hey, good morning and welcome to Scan FYI. This is a very special edition today because today is September 11th. It's 2023, and 22 years ago on this day, really everything in the world changed when the tragedy at the World Trade Center. So my very special guest today to join me is Terese Rolke. Hi, Terese.
Hi, Andrea. Nice to join you today.
So I think a lot of people watching today certainly know you in your capacity in the chamber. So why don't you just give a little brief description of what that is, and then we're going to get into it.
Okay, sounds good. So I'm the executive director of the Monmouth Regional Chamber of Commerce. We are an incredible group of business owners who support each other and really care about each other. We serve the entire county and its surrounding borders, and we have lots and lots of events to choose from every single month. We're very, very active.
And I should say, is a proud member of the chamber.
Yes.
Terese is not here as the chamber president, and actually I've known Terese for really a long time now. Oh my goodness, a very long time. So here's the backstory and why we're kind of commemorating September 11th with Terese. So probably a lot of people don't know this, but I used to have a radio show called Jersey Coastal Live. I did that for about 5.5 years. It was on Blog Talk Radio. I interviewed someone once a week for about 30 minutes. And as you can imagine, over 5.5 years, I interviewed a lot of people. So it was August of 2013. August. I'm sorry, it was, yes, August of 2013. And I was just, and who was sitting across the desk from me in my office at Scan? Terese. And why was that, Terese?
Well, because back then we worked together, doing a program called Take Control of Your Health. And so I was always in your office.
That's right. It was our office. So Terese was sitting across from me, and I was lining up my guests for my radio show, and I was talking out loud just because I was, and I was speculating, and I'd really like to find someone who had actually been at the World Trade Center for on that terrible day in 2001, because I would like to interview them. And while I knew people who had secondhand stories, I wanted to find someone with firsthand knowledge. And all of a sudden, Terese just looked up and said, I was there. And of course, I didn't know that. And why would I know that, right? Why would I know that? So I said, Terese, would you be my guest? So sure enough, for 9/11/2013 on Blog Talk Radio on Jersey Coastal Live, Terese Rolke was my special guest. And we talked about her experiences at the World Trade Center on that fateful day. So here we are, 12 years later, Terese.
Yeah, it was 2013, so it was 10 years ago.
Maybe? Oh, wait a minute, 10. Oh God, see, math is not my strong point. And everyone who knows me knows that.
But I can't believe it's been 10 years.
All right, yeah, 10 years. Yeah, so 10 years later, I asked Terese. We said let's talk about this again. So I'm just going to read a little something that I had written back then, and that'll be kind of our jumping off point. All right, so this is from 2013. Terese Rolke was an employee of American Express, and she was there. She had been on vacation for the past 2 weeks, and this was to be her first day back to work. Terese took the train to Newark, followed by the path to the World Trade Center. Just a normal day, right?
Yep. Yep.
She was just getting off the escalator to the shopping concourse when suddenly terrified screams filled the air and people began stampeding towards exits, sweeping Terese along with the crowd. She had no awareness of what had happened and speculated someone might have had a gun. Others in the crowd screamed a bomb had exploded inside the tower. And this would be the last day Terese worked in New York City.
Yep. That was it. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So does it bring, I mean, I don't know if it's something you think about on a daily basis, something like this.
No, but as we come into September, or when I hear about a date or a calendar thing for September 11th, it always is a reminder. Always is a reminder.
I feel like, so for me, this is one of those dates, like I could tell you exactly where I was when John F. Kennedy was shot.
Yeah.
And I could tell you exactly my circumstances during this day, because these are just something that is, I feel like this is just so embedded in our consciousness. But of course, for you, you were there. So
Yeah.
do you want to share anything about this that really comes to mind?
Yeah, it was the scariest day of my life because I just did not know what was happening. You know, you get swept up. On my first day back to work, I was more concerned about the laptop I was lugging than anything else because I originally dropped it in the stampede and I had to pick it up because I'm like, I'm responsible for company property. I can't lose this. I don't know what's happening. So, so we got swept up and we were heading towards the doors on VC Street, which is the side street of the building that I was in. I mean, the concourse level of the Trade Center. I was thinking, you know, you hear about concerts where people get stampeded and they get,
Right,
you know,
right.
injured. That was going through my mind. And when I saw this was happening and I was experiencing it, I actually said out loud, why is everyone running? I wanted to know why. They said a bomb went off because I was thinking a gun. And I said, oh, maybe there was a bomb. Maybe there's a gun. I'm just going to follow the crowd. And then we get to the doors and there was a police officer there, like trying to tell us, don't come out, don't come out. And now I'm looking at the crowd behind us. I'm like, oh my God, somebody better open that door. And they did, and we all spilled it onto the street. And when we hit the street, there was concrete, papers, and glass everywhere.
You saw,
That's what we
yeah.
stepped out to. And now I was afraid to step onto the street where that was because I'm like, what if there's more debris falling? Maybe it was a bomb after all. So I kind of stayed back against the building and I went into the first doorway that I found and turned out to be a deli. The lights were out, the employees looked scared, and I was like, what the heck is going on? You know, and then in the end we were told to evacuate and get out because they have to clear everything out. And I finally did have to step out onto the street. And when I looked up, there was fire blazing, there was smoke billowing, and there was still papers floating out of the building like confetti.
Those iconic scenes that we saw on TV with
Yeah.
papers flying everywhere. So
Yeah.
at this point, the American Airlines Flight 11, that first plane had hit the tower.
That's what caused this.
And that's what
Yes.
yeah. So up until but you didn't, how could you know this?
Didn't know this. We're on the street. We're not listening to the news. We're experiencing it live.
Yeah.
And I was literally like a block or two away from where it was. And I was just like, you know, you don't think about the lives and the people inside. I was thinking about, oh my God, the damage to this building. How are they going to fix this? Thinking, you don't know what's going on, you know? And then I realized I needed to get as far away from the towers as they were tall. That's all I was thinking at that point. And everybody was just staring. And I was like, no, 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 I don't need to see anything more. I'm out of here. And I start pushing my way through the crowd, you know, like a salmon swimming upstream, you know,
Yeah,
fighting
yeah.
the current and trying to push my way through the crowd. And then I don't know, I don't know how far I got when someone said, oh my God, why did he jump? And I turned around and I saw somebody like just free falling. That I did, you know, his tie was floating up and he was just free falling. And I was like, that's when the lives became real. Like, oh my God, I wasn't thinking about people inside. And I just said to her, well, imagine what he was going through inside to make that choice.
Right, right, right,
And then
right.
I was like, I'm out of here. So I just kept pushing my way up the street until I came to a spot where I had the option to take a subway to Brooklyn or walk uptown. And I didn't realize where I was standing at the time. But while I was trying to make my decision, all of a sudden I felt a rumble through the ground and through my body. And then I saw an explosion in front of me. Now I could only see Tower 1 from where I was. Tower 2 is next to it, but I didn't realize that Tower 2 got hit. I just thought perhaps whatever this was, and I forget if we heard by now if plane hit the tower. I don't remember if that's when I heard, and I thought maybe the plane exploded from inside the tower that was hit originally.
Right.
But at that point, when I stepped away from the building, there was glass in front of me. The windows had blown out from the buildings around me. There was somebody not too far from me with blood on his shirt. I didn't realize I had stood. I had to track my steps later, when I had gone back to the city weeks later. I'm like, where was I standing that I didn't get hit with glass or got hurt? I was standing against a building with overhang, So I
Wow.
was very lucky to be standing there. And that explosion made me decide not to go underground. I
Because
decided,
it almost felt, I almost feel like it could have felt like an earthquake.
mm-hmm,
Again, not knowing,
yeah,
meanwhile, we're watching this on television. You're there.
yeah, yeah. So I
So
kind
you
of
made a good
panicked.
call not
I
to
kind
go
of
under.
panicked
Yeah.
a little bit. I said, oh my God, where do I go? What do I do? Where am I safe? Where is it safe? And then somebody, I swear, stopped and said, don't panic. That's when you get hurt. I can't define the person. I can't tell you who it was. I don't even know, but I heard that message. So I calmed down and I said, I'm not going in the subway. I'm just going to walk uptown and see how far I can get. And what I found was, and then I'm thinking, I got to call somebody. Let me get in touch with family. I'll tell them, I don't know what's really happening here. Um, my mother works at the time, she was working as the assistant principal at New Utrecht High School in Brooklyn. And I knew she had a doctor's appointment with my dad. And I wanted to call her to tell her, don't go to work today. But not realizing, of course, this is going to be all over the news. So I tried to get online, with the old-fashioned phone booth because the cell phones weren't working and there was a line. I was like, I can't do that. So I just walked uptown a little bit and I found myself at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge. So I decided I'm getting out of New York and
I'm walking to Brooklyn.
I'm going to walk to Brooklyn. And it's funny because I never really carried a lot of money in my wallet, but I happened to have $100 in my wallet that day because I went to the bank and forgot to leave some money at home. I said, at the very least, once I get to Brooklyn, maybe I can catch a car and take it back to New Jersey to my parents' house. It gave me confidence to walk, to make that attempt to go over the bridge. I kind of like this plan was unfolding in my head for the quickest exit out of the city. But what I found was there
What,
were
Therese,
cars.
what
Yeah.
was happening around you as you were walking
Mhm.
uptown, heading towards the bridge? What were you seeing?
Well, everybody was,
Tons of people, I'm sure.
tons of people just on the street. The biggest thing, and sometimes I have flashbacks from this, constant sirens blaring the whole time. Tons of sirens blaring the whole time. So sometimes if there's a lot of sirens somewhere, sometimes I'll think of 9/11 because that's just a reflex, just a passing car, a siren going past doesn't do anything. But if there's loud, constant sirens, that does put me back to that
And
day.
was there also lots of debris that you were seeing all over the place?
Oh, yeah, everywhere. I mean, as I got further away from where I was, like when I was in direct line with the building, and coming down with all the debris on the street and the windows that blew out around me, once I got away from that, there was nothing on the ground anymore.
Of course, the buildings hadn't collapsed at that point.
They had not collapsed at that point. This is how fast I
Yeah.
was able to make my way out of the city. I swear I had guardian angels that day. I was talking to all my relatives that were gone and saying, just get me out of here. Just help me, guide me, get me out of here. I just didn't know where to go. But
So now you're on the Brooklyn Bridge
I
and
was
you're
actually at the foot of the Brooklyn Bridge,
okay.
the ramp that you could walk up.
Yep.
And here's the other thing. So cars are going up. And I said to myself, the easiest thing would be to hitchhike over the bridge and get out of here. But I've never hitchhiked a day in my life. And I'm thinking, hey, I'll survive this craziness and then something will happen to me in a stranger's car. And so I was afraid to stop a car, but it was going through my head. Do you know that these two women came by and they stopped the next car and said, can we get in? She said, yes. And then I said, can I get in too? She said, yes. And then one of those women said, I don't want to go to Brooklyn. I live in Manhattan. And they left. They stopped that car for me. That's what I'm like, I was thinking about doing it, but I hesitated. They stopped the car and I got in, not them.
You didn't want to go to Brooklyn. Okay.
They decided not to go to Brooklyn. But I was just amazed that that car was stopped and I didn't stop it. But I got my ride that I was thinking about. So I get in the car with the woman and I thanked her for picking me up. And as we were going over the bridge, at this point, I had heard that it could be a terrorist attack and 2 planes were involved. At this point, the talk on the street was that. Okay. So I actually was afraid to go over the Brooklyn Bridge because I thought the next plane was going to come through the bridges. Because that's what went through my head. But I said, I got to get out of here. I'm gonna just do it.
And the person who was driving you, I'm wondering, where were they? What were they doing out and about?
Here's another amazing thing. So I was talking to her, but I didn't really look at her at this point. And I said, whatever's going on right now, you're actually saving me. I said, you're going to have a story to tell your kids one day, and so am I, because you're saving me. You're getting me out of danger. And I looked at her, and she was dressed in white. And I said, what do you do? She said, I'm a nurse. I just got off duty, and I wanted to come downtown to see if I could help anybody. I was like, oh my God, this was amazing. This was amazing to me. It was just the timing of everything was amazing. So I told her that I just drop me over on the other side of the bridge. You can, wherever you're going, I'll just, I'll catch a cab or a car service to where I'm going. Just tell me where you want to go. I said, well, I'd like to go to New Utrecht High School on the other side of Brooklyn. She goes, I don't know Brooklyn that well. I'm from Queens. Why don't you tell me how to get there and I'll drop you off at your destination? Because I figured, I know my mother has colleagues that carpool from Mattawan train station. So I figured if I could get back to, even though my mother's not there, I know her colleagues. So I knew that they would give me a ride home if I could just get there. So she took me. I navigated the side streets because we couldn't get back on the ramp like the BQ. We couldn't get on the ramp because all the cars were stopped looking at the towers. So I said, all right, we'll just take the side streets and get out of here. And that's how I actually got out. I was listening to the rest of it unfold on her radio. She was listening to the radio.
By that time, I guess we had the awareness to know more about what had actually happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I was listening to the radio and all of a sudden they were screaming that the tower 1 is falling. Tower 1 is falling. And I'm like, what do they mean Tower 1 is falling? Like I couldn't comprehend what that meant. I'm thinking, is the infrastructure still there and it collapsed when there's still to have all the metal is I could not imagine that the whole thing came down.
Terese, I don't think anyone could have really imagined that.
Yeah. And at this point, I didn't know anything because I was listening to the radio. I wasn't seeing it anywhere. So she got me to my destination at New York High School. I asked her if I can give her money. She said no. I said, well, can you give me your contact information so I could stay in touch with you? She said, sure. So she gave me her name and her phone number and her address. And I walked into the school, and you got to realize how terrified I was. All I kept saying is, where is my sanctuary? Where is my sanctuary? And that's that, even going to New York High School, I didn't know what to expect. But I figured that would be the best sanctuary for me at this point.
And the
And
luck
that's,
of the draw that you actually had a destination in mind that was real, that you could do this.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah. So she dropped me off. I walked into the building. The security card was there. The security guard was there. And she said, how can I help you? And I totally lost it.
Yeah.
I just lost it. And I was just crying and crying. And I said, I just came from the World Trade Center. Marie Messina's daughter. She's the assistant principal in charge of special ed. She goes, I know who she is. So
Was the guard aware of what had transpired?
I believe she did. She knew what was going on. Yeah. Because, yeah. At this point, she brought me into the lobby of the school. It was actually primary day because there were voting booths in the school lobby, and there were students crying. There was just so much turmoil even in the school.
Sure.
And so she brought me to the principal's office, and they said they were gonna get my mother's secretary to come down because I knew my mother wasn't there that day. And I just can't. Yeah. I was so lucky that everything happened as quickly as it did, and that I was presented these choices and I was able to find the right path. You know what I'm saying?
You made the right choices, and there were some people along the way that somehow were placed there, and they got you to where you needed to go. And when you say how when you got to the high school and then you could finally collapse, and be emotional, because when you reacted so well under the pressure of it, because who has time to react? You just have to you have to move, you have to get out of there. And that's obviously how you focused all your energy. You moved really quickly, and you were very fortunate.
And I will tell you, Christopher was in second grade at the time. He's 29 now, but he was in second grade. And all I kept saying was, I have to get home to Christopher. And that was what drove me, you know?
And how did you wind up getting back home to New Jersey from the high school?
So, so finally my mother's secretary came down. She's met me before. I actually, all these years before, I used to take Christopher in to visit my mother on his birthday, and we would have lunch together. So I got to know her whole staff over the years. That to me, again, was amazing. That I was comfortable with people working there, and I knew that I could go to them for help.
Yeah.
So they took me upstairs to her office. They were trying to get through to her on the phone. The phones weren't even working from there. They managed to get a hold of her through the fax machine line. They managed to get a hold of her just to tell her I was safe and I was there. And she's like, what the heck? How did she get there?
And your mom knew? She had by then it was all over the news.
It was all over the news. She never went in because she saw it as soon as it was happening. They were at the doctor's office, and the TVs were playing at the doctor's office.
Got it.
So she had seen it. After they left the doctor's office, my sister and my dad immediately went to the school in Eatontown where Christopher was and took him home to their house because they didn't want him exposed to anything that he might get upset about, knowing I worked there. Even though he was in second grade, he knew I worked near the Trade Center. He knew where I was. He used to come to work with me on, take your kids to work day and stuff like that. So, so I was so grateful that they thought about doing that and getting him home, So they found out that I was okay. Everything was good with me. And then one of her employees bought me lunch. One of her coworkers bought me lunch, and everything was good. And the people that were going to Matterhorn, we were all stuck at the moment because they had shut the bridges down at that point. So I said, well, whenever the bridges reopen, I'm getting in your car. They said, of course you are.
Of
Yeah.
course.
Yeah. So so I guess this was pretty, I don't even know. It was probably, this is all happening, but 8:45 to about 9:30. I was probably there 10:30 in the morning, or 11, something around there. And then by the time they reopened the bridges, it was close to, I don't know, 2 or 3 o'clock. And they said, "You want to go now?" I said, "Yeah," before they shut them again.
Right before they change their minds.
Before
Yeah.
they changed their minds. So we all got in the car and we drove. And that was very emotional for me. When we went over the Verrazano Bridge and I turned to look at downtown New York.
Right.
And when I left the city, the smoke and the fire was coming from the sky. And when we crossed that bridge, it was coming from the ground. I was like, oh my, how does this happen? Like he just never imagined that that was the result of everything. So
Somehow you were spared some of the worst moments because you were able to exit so quickly.
yeah,
And sometimes it's just the luck of the draw. It happened. You
yeah,
you were wherever you were at that moment, maybe 10 minutes before, 10 minutes after,
yes, yes,
you wouldn't have had those opportunities.
you are right. Because I have talked to people that were on the same path train as me that had a different experience than I did. But like I waited a little longer because I hate to walk through the crowd. So I waited a little longer to let people off the train before I got off the train. And even that. Whereas somebody I know got off the train immediately and he had a whole different experience.
Of course. Of course.
That those few minutes made a difference. Yeah.
If you actually gotten into your office earlier, you would have had yet another experience.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. So I'm saying the timing and the sequence of events was amazing to me.
So
I
when you
did.
think about it now in 2023, and it's 22 years ago, and
Yeah.
is it as shocking as ever for you that you were physically there?
Yeah. Well, I got to tell you, one of the hardest things to come to terms with when I finally got to my parents' house, the first thing my mother said to me was her cousin worked in Tower 2. And his wife had called my mother, knowing I also worked downtown, and wanted to know if she had heard from me and if I was okay, because she had a message from Richard, her husband, on her voicemail saying that he was okay. It's the other tower.
Oh,
And that was the last time she heard from him. So that was devastating that we lost my mother's cousin in 9/11, and I survived. And of course there was some guilt because I'm like,
survivor's guilt.
all I was like, oh my God, I was just so focused on getting away from everything. I didn't stop to think about who's left behind or who I didn't think. I was just focused on Christopher. I need to get home to Christopher. And I don't know what I would have done if I thought about anybody else. And I'm not a selfish person, but to realize that, well, first of all the brave people that went into the towers to save as many people as they could, I just my heart goes out to them for the work that they did and for the lives that were lost. That was really obviously traumatic, even though the experience was traumatic. That was all traumatic to everybody, not just myself.
Mhm.
But to lose my mom's cousin was heart-wrenching. No, no.
It's still, even just hearing it now again, it's like you were telling me 10 years ago. Like
Hmm.
the clarity,
Hmm.
you still have it because
Hmm.
some memories just they don't go away.
Yeah, they're
Such a
there.
traumatic experience.
And when we first started talking before you even started recording, I said, "Oh my gosh, I haven't thought about that day in so long in detail." And then you were asking me, "You think you'll remember?" And I was like, "Oh, I know I'll remember." Once I start talking, I knew I would remember. Yeah.
Yeah, well, Therese, thank you for sharing it. I know
Yeah.
it was a very traumatic day, and you I mean you I mean not I don't want to say surprisingly, I don't even know what the right word is, but somehow for you, so many things fell into place,
Mhm.
and the fact is here we are to talk about it,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is
Yeah.
a good thing.
Well,
But
yeah.
it's a day that in the United States, and I think most of the world, no one will ever say September 11th without remembering what happened on September 11th.
Mhm.
And I feel like it's always a necessary thing to have these conversations, to remember,
Mhm.
because I'm a believer in learning from the past, and that's why we have to know our history. We have to realize, I mean, you're one episode out of thousands.
I was going to say that there are thousands of stories out there.
Yeah,
People I'm friends with had an experience that was
yeah.
different, and I've heard their stories as well. Everyone's got their stories about their individual time in their individual space, and it
Hmm.
was different than everybody else's,
No, I
you know.
feel that everyone who you would speak to, have the honor to speak to about September 11th, is going to have an entirely unique situation. So and we're highlighting your situation,
Mhm.
and thank you for that.
Yes, you're very welcome. This is right after it happened. I happened to call the next day, I happened to call the nurse at Christopher's elementary school because I had him at home. We were at home together the day before because it was our last day before school started. And I forgot to send a note to the nurse to say he's going to be out of school for the day. So I called her the next day to apologize that I didn't send the note and to make it official that I had him out. We had a day together before, well, not before school. I guess it was his first day of school. And yeah, it was his first day of school. So he had started school the week before. That's right. So anyway, I had called her to apologize, and she said, "Are you okay?" They all knew where I worked. I said, "I'm okay." And then she said, "Talk about it, talk about it, talk about it till you get sick of hearing yourself
Well,
talk
that's
about
how you heal. That's how we heal.
it." And I thanked her for that advice. And as people know, I am an open book. If somebody has a question, I tell them, I tell them. So I did tell the story lots of times. And I remember the most important story I told, I'm going to cry, was to Richard's son at his service. He wanted to know what my experience was to help him get through the grief that he had. Well, not that he would get through it with my story, but he
Right.
just wanted to know my firsthand account of what happened down there. And I told him anything, everything that he wanted to know, I told him. And to me, that was the most important story I told, was to help him.
What was it that made you say, I'm not going back to New York?
Um, I actually had been tired of all the long commute, being away from Christopher, so far from him. And I had been wanting to leave New York for a while. I just happened to like my job. I was doing video production work at American Express at the time, and it was a fun and unique job, and doing offsite meetings and stuff, and it was different. And so I just kept the job, but I really hated the commute. So this was my way to just end it and just look for work in New Jersey after that. Yeah. Yeah. And especially after this, I'm like, yeah. Not that I go to, it was hard in the beginning because I did have to go back for a couple of things, but it was hard in the beginning. But then like I said, retraced my steps to find out where I was and when and how did I get out of this without harm. So yeah, but it was time to leave New York, and I haven't worked there since. So
I think there were many people who had that experience of, well, that's it for me.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So yeah, I totally understand it.
All right. Well, Terese, I'm so pleased that you agreed to join me today for this very special edition of Scan FYI. We're commemorating September 11th, 2001, which, wow, long time ago, but on the
Yeah,
other hand, like yesterday.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, right. Oh, thank you so much, Andrea. I
All right.
appreciate you and
Well, this
talking with you.
episode will be out, and this will be up on our YouTube channel so people can watch it. And I hope that people will watch it because I believe we have to remember.
Yeah.
I sincerely feel that way. And remember out there, if it's important to you, it's important to us. I'm Andrea Tarr, and this has been a special edition of Scan FYI with my special guest, Terese Rolke. Thank you.
Yeah.